In today's economy, there are only around 1,000 companies who have surpassed 100 years of existence. That's a substantial amount of time, and with that time, most companies make a few mistakes along the way. Pepsi is one of those century-old companies, and while doing my research, I found that whether it be financial or ethical mistakes, they've pretty much been in trouble for longer than they've been in the clear. I've taken a look at video games, cameras, writers, and even your very soul. So why not do a video on a company this time? In this video, I'll be talking about Pepsi and some of the history behind this now monster of a conglomerate, and how even when you're on top, you can still shit the bed. Sorry, we don't have Coke. Is Pepsi okay? To give some background, Pepsi, the drink, originally started out as Brad's Drink, created by Caleb Bradham in North Carolina back in 1898, as a health soda, right up there with your health cigarettes.
Parts of the country were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?"
Bradham saw that Coke, the product, and also Coke, the drug, was super popular, but wanted to make a drink of his own without all the cocaine. After Brad's Drink was created, Bradham would sell the syrup to those who came to the pharmacy he owned and operated. Similar to today, you could get drinks and snacks at pharmacies back in the 1890s. Brad's Drink would be rebranded to Pepsi, as Bradham was still firm on creating a health-inspired drink to compete with Coke. The drink, not the drug, but also maybe the drug? Pepsi because it was believed to help with indigestion, or for my fancy people, dyspepsia. Bradham would die at the age of 66 in 1934 due to long-term illness, but not before witnessing Pepsi file for bankruptcy twice in the same year. What happened was, in 1923, Bradham thought the price of sugar would spike, and bought a ton of it. The price of sugar did not spike, and it was a huge financial loss. On the brink of collapse and with two new owners, Pepsi would take advantage of the Great Depression and strike gold with an ingenious idea: cutting prices. I know, daring. It was during this time Pepsi would begin selling their drink in 12-ounce bottles, substantially more than that of Coke's at the time, and also for a reduced price. Pepsi would release a jingle for this innovative change.
Nickel, trickle, 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 Pepsi-Cola hits the spot. 12 full ounces, that's a lot. Twice as much for a nickel, too. Pepsi-Cola is a drink for you. Nickel, 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 nickel.
And the rest is history. Really, for a while there, Pepsi was just another company with a rocky start that made it big. There's a rumor that at one point, Pepsi had one of the largest armies in the world. How this came about was that Pepsi during 1972 wanted to break into the tightly controlled Soviet Union market as a way to quote-unquote spread American culture. Unfortunately for Pepsi, the Soviet ruble was essentially useless, or in a way not secure enough to take as actual payment for their products. Thus, a barter system for the two parties came into play. Pepsi-Cola for Stolichnaya vodka. This vodka would be sold in the States, and the revenue would be used as compensation for the Soviet Union's Pepsi orders. Eventually, the demand for this particular vodka decreased to a point where it was no longer sustainable. This led to talks where Pepsi needed something else in exchange for their products. What could be the next logical step from vodka in this exchange? Oh yeah, everyone knows it's decommissioned warships that can be sold for scrap. Of course, how silly of me to forget. This is a twist on what actually happened. The resulting trade would in reality have the Soviet Union build shipping freighters for Pepsi. Ultimately, this deal would never go through as the Soviet Union would collapse before it could be realized. Pepsi was pretty cool with it for a second. I'm sure this was only done with the approval of the American government to drain communist resources, but the integration of culture is something I'm never opposed to. Life was good. Pepsi saw the potential in national markets and the future was looking bright. But then, the 1990s happened. Pepsi, being eager, saw their first hitch in the rise to all-time stardom with Madonna in 1989. Sure, they had to battle Coke for market shares and customer base, but at the end of the day, they were the expected competition. They would make plans and marketing strategies to combat Coke. What happens, though, when you can't point the finger to anyone else but yourself? When it came to Madonna, Pepsi paid for a $5 million commercial that would never see the light of day. That is until one September 33 years later. Link can be found below. The actual commercial was nothing crazy or outrageous. So you're probably sitting there asking why didn't the commercial get pulled? Prior to the commercial's release, Madonna's music video for Like a Prayer was dropped and depicted her kissing a priest. The Vatican and I guess a few Pepsi drinkers lost their shit when they saw that Pepsi was working with this devil worshipper, so Pepsi canceled the ad. Pretty cowardly in my book, especially in a few years from now, Pepsi will drop another terrible ad going in the other direction, and failing miserably too. In the grand scheme, however, despite the cowardly move on Pepsi's part, they only really shot themselves in the foot by wasting $5 million, and a couple hours of Madonna's life, ending by just sort of fizzling out. In 1992, Pepsi, wanting to break into the Filipino market, had started a little numbers game that would go down not only in Pepsi history, but the history of the Philippines as well. The Philippines are not on the US dollar, can you imagine that? Instead they use pesos, which are separate from Mexican pesos. Pepsi, as part of their promotion, would print numbers on the bottom of Pepsi bottle caps, and then have the national news read a set of winning numbers out every day. These winning numbers would have a chance of winning cash prizes, with the grand prize being 1 million pesos or 40,000-ish in USD. For a minute there, it was going good. People were buying Pepsi, getting into the whole lottery system, and having an overall blast. That is, until the grand prize. Yeah, somehow, somewhere along the line, at the biggest and arguably most important number announcement, someone got the numbers wrong. It said that Pepsi had a tight control on which numbers would be printed, but I guess not tight enough. This surmounted to a result where there were multiple winners, resulting in a total payout of $38 billion. Pepsi, only being worth around a speculative $8 billion, could not pay the winners. If you think people got mad about Madonna, you should see what happens when you fuck with their money. Riots soon began, under the 349 alliance, leading to 30-plus instances of confirmed truck flippings and several large hostile gatherings outside of the Pepsi bottling plant. Executives would receive death threats, and eventually the tipping point would be a homemade bomb going off and killing 5 people. During this time, Pepsi offered each winner $18 in good faith. This was good for some, but not all, and the case was escalated to the Philippines Supreme Court. Those who held out on payments received slightly higher amounts, but nowhere near the million pesos. Eventually, in 2001, the courts ruled that Pepsi would no longer be responsible for the incident, and they have no obligations to pay out any further settlements. This whole story is wild, as one of the suspects arrested by the Filipino police during the riots allegedly stated that Pepsi had paid this man to incite violence to portray the rioters as violent terrorists. A Filipino senator stated that rival bottled drink makers could be the ones to actually pay this man and take advantage of Pepsi's error. Pepsi is said to have paid at least around $9 million in damages and payouts. As of 2023, Pepsi sales in the Philippines' annual revenue was around 700,000 USD. Coke still dominates there with a market share of 63%. Pepsi, thinking that the competition went so well in the Philippines, decided to do another one here in the States, while they were still dealing with the fallout of the Philippines. Now this one got shot into the limelight after a pretty good Netflix documentary called Pepsi Where's My Jet got released. I'll touch on this one briefly, but Pepsi launched a marketing campaign where Pepsi products could be traded or redeemed for points, similar to a school fundraiser where they give you a prize book and tell you to bug your loved ones to buy cookies or whatever. This was announced in the form of a video ad, or a daytime television commercial if you remember what live television was like. I hope I don't have a super young audience, but at one point, binging was just called marathons. In this ad, the Pepsi point system was explained, and the big reveal at the end showed a Harrier jet for 7 million Pepsi points. One factor of the Pepsi Point program was that points could be purchased with currency after a certain amount of points were obtained through the purchase of a Pepsi product. A man by the name of John Leonard would eventually come to the conclusion that he could own his own $23 million jet for just $700,000, or in other words, a 97% discount. Pepsi, obviously, like the number fever escapade, could not fulfill these terms. Leonard, not having this, took Pepsi to court to either get a jet or an equal payout of said jet. The courts would rule that the commercial was not a contractual agreement on the behalf of Pepsi, and Leonard was entitled to nothing, which is bullshit. They showed prices all the time even after this whole thing that would lead those to watching to think that this is the price of the product. Look at this one right here. I remember this one very specifically. I am not a judge, but it seems like this whole thing could have been avoided if Pepsi just accurately priced the jet as the proper exchange rates of Pepsi points. As if the jet is priced at $700,000, then Pepsi should have to pay out $700,000 for the jet they cannot provide, as this is the established value of the cost of the Harrier jets over at Pepsi. If only they put the more accurate 230 million points, life would be a lot easier for them. Jumping back in time from the 90s to the 80s just for a little moment, this next story involves the king of pop, Michael Jackson. During a long day of shooting a commercial, both the director and Jackson grew tired of shooting, and the expenses of the pyrotechnics at play were beginning to grow to a rather pricey amount. The director, wanting to make this take the last take, would have Michael stand unusually close to the point of detonation of these pyrotechnics. Once the cameras were rolling, the detonation of the explosives would engulf the singer in a cloud of flames. Jackson would sustain second and third degree burns to his scalp and rush to a nearby hospital. There, Jackson would receive a treatment and recover with minimal complications. Pepsi and Jackson would settle out of court for $1.5 million, where Jackson would donate the money to the hospital that treated him. The commercial did air and was considered a successful ad, unlike this next one. It's 2017. It's been a turbulent year. The focus on racial tensions are on a rise, and the Take a Stand rally in Baton Rouge following the shooting of Alton Sterling, who was killed by a police officer, is further proof and relevant to the story. Pepsi, wanting to be a cool woke company, made an estimated $100 million ad that got them into some pretty hot water. Picture this. There are multiple documented instances where people are pulled into police lines and arrested or just straight up assaulted. I ain't on the ACAB hype train, I'm just stating what happens at protests that get a little wild for the city's liking. America doesn't have a great rap when it comes to the treatment of minorities. If you haven't heard about this, welcome to Earth. Sore subject, lots of nuance and ethics and philosophy and discussions on police states, and you know how it is. So you know what Pepsi did? They got Kendall Jenner, yeah, the Kendall Jenner, I know guys, so cool, to star in a commercial where she breaks the picket line to give a cop a Pepsi. Let me set the scene. Actually, we'll do a play-by-play. Opening scene, Pepsi cracks, cello on top of skyscraper. Crowds protesting, peace? Cue Kendall. What is she doing? Quick guys, she's modeling, very relatable, she's a model. It makes sense, great save guys. Another cello, more modeling. Pepsi sip, Pepsi lean. Angry at peace, really angry at peace. Band practice, and this? Tears off privilege, steals Pepsi, you go girl. Cop wouldn't do that, could have something in it. I don't even know anymore. Oh, it's def had something in it. Go crazy, fade to black, close set, crocodile tears. Yeah, so there's a few problems here. Most of them I played up, but yeah, not taking a side, or sometimes referred to as fence sitting, is not something you should do if you're spending $100 million. You should make a point. This commercial has been memed to the moon and back, making an appearance on the series The Boys and SNL, which I can't show here because they will remove this video. I've done it before. I've narrowed the reason why this commercial was received so poorly down to about 3 main problems out of the 1,000. Number 1, there's not an actual protest taking place. They're having a peace gathering. This is for peace, and if anything, is like a festival at this point with musicians. One might call this a music festival? The cops are in the most bare bones uniform and honestly look like they're just there to make sure people are safe and don't get trampled. Number 2, Kendall is implied to have no knowledge of this protest, therefore not knowing what she is supporting. It appears she's just jumping in line because of a chance to be seen doing something down to earth. At least, that's the impression I got. Number 3, Aisha Evans. Aisha Evans was protesting in Baton Rouge during 2016. She did a similar action to Kendall in this commercial, or I guess Kendall did what Aisha did. However, where it differs, instead of being cheered on by all, Evans would be placed under arrest. Maybe it was the Pepsi after all. That's what Pepsi wants me to think. These 3 points paint the full picture that Jenner, and in a larger picture, Pepsi don't actually care about any social movement, but rather the profit that can be made from trying to have consumers identify with them and their supposed beliefs. Yeah, Pepsi's kind of nuts, and as recent as November 2023, they're being sued by New York because improper disposal of plastic waste alongside the Buffalo River. So this probably won't be the last we hear of Pepsi. If you enjoyed this video, thank you so much. I appreciate you watching till the end. I know it was a shorter one. Merch can be found in the description down below. If you enjoyed it, let me know what you think. Yeah, please like and subscribe. I'm Gideon, and peace out.